Hi everyone, my name is Kira. I'm an English teacher, and in this video we're going to be doing a teardown of a speech from the composition section of English paper 1, and it's from 2014. So you have the sample answer here on the left and the question there in bold, and we're going to be looking at a few main areas here and breaking down the essay. And firstly, with something like this, it's really important to break down the question and pull it apart and decide which parts are the most important and what we really need to focus on. Then we're going to be looking at the structure, mainly the introduction and the sort of the main body and the main arguments. And then finally, a few language features and some stylistic elements that really make the speech effective. At this point, I would always recommend to students to mind the gap, as I say. It's an acronym for GAP. G, genre. The genre of this is a passionate speech. So straight away, you should be thinking about all of the elements that you would usually include in a speech and the kind of language features that would be relevant. The A then is for audience. So who are you making your speech to? Who are you delivering your speech to? Who is listening? In this case, it is a World Youth Public Speaking Championship. So we know that it's formal and we know that it's international and it's a serious competition. And obviously that's going to make a difference on how we deliver our speech and the language we use, but also the tone and the style that you use, depending on whether you're speaking to, in a more formal setting or an informal setting. So that's why we always start at this point, making sure we know who our audience are. And finally, then the P for gap is purpose. What is the purpose of this speech? What are you trying to achieve? Well, in this case, it's a passionate speech. It's like a debate speech, and it's in favor of a motion. And the motion is that young people should exert their influence by actively engaging with important current issues. So we know what our purpose is, and we keep that to the forefront of our mind so that we don't lose focus. And our purpose, that will really help us with our purpose marks when looking at the marking scheme, that you'll be focused and you'll always remember what you're trying to achieve, while also keeping with the genre, the passionate speech, and also keeping in mind who you're delivering your speech to, and that's your audience. So firstly, let's look at the introduction. There's 3 things that I'd like to pick out of this opening paragraph, and there's no set order to this. You can probably do it in whatever order you want, but we're just going to highlight how this student has achieved these 3 things. And the first thing is the greeting. It is a formal speech and it is in favor. It's a sort of a debate format, so it's really important that you address your audience and that there's some sort of formal greeting. In this case, we've got Mr. Chairperson, adjudicators, etc. But you could just say Chairperson or Madam Chairperson if you prefer. But either way, you are addressing all of the areas of the audience, all the different people who are going to be listening to you, and that just adds that formality to it as well. Second thing, which is a really effective thing that a lot of students do in the opening paragraph, is a quote. It's kind of like a hook. It gets your attention, it gets you focused and brings the audience in, I suppose, as well, and kind of gets you interested. And this is a nice quote from Bill Clinton. Again, it should be a quote by somebody that's quite relevant or someone that students are going to know and they're going to recognize. And the third thing in this, really important for the examiners all to see that you've got your focus and you're focused on your purpose, is that you address the question. Somewhere in the opening paragraph, you should reword the question and look at how you're going to address it and how you're going to engage with the specifics of the topic. So that means this is all going to be about the influence that young people have and how they're going to use that influence. Structuring the idea is then really, really important. So the main ideas for the student, the first one was having something that was kind of a personal experience or making it relevant to their readers. And their second idea is focusing on social media and looking at how that's an important influence. And then the third element of the essay was about climate change. Again, I thought was really topical and really interesting to put that in here as well. Again, at this point, we should point out things that we should avoid or pitfalls, things we don't want to fall into a trap. Organizing your ideas, so organize your points and make sure that you have a good sequence. Link them from one to the next so that they flow well. And finally, then, that we always keep the question in mind. And that's why we did that exercise at the beginning with the gap and making sure we're always focused on what is being asked. The personal approach, then, you can see this lovely example here in an early paragraph of the idea of the personal approach. I'm sure all of us here, and it's up to us. So straight away, this person is very much involved in what they're saying and they're taking that kind of personal approach and that personal standpoint. So the I personal pronoun indicates the personal experience, and even the us and that kind of inclusion is really, really important as well. Relevant kind of references like Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. So straight away, people are going, yeah, I know those, I use those. It makes it relevant. It makes it interesting to your audience. And thirdly, then, our thoughts and opinions, or we were used to, again, inclusive language that we see throughout this speech. And again, the inclusive language is such a nice feature. It brings your audience with you in whatever you're saying and brings everyone along and kind of engages them as well. Now, secondly, then we mentioned social media campaigns. And again, keeping it interesting and engaging and topical for your audience, really, really important. So I just pulled out a few examples of some social media campaigns here in the main body of the speech. Any of the hashtags, there's a few hashtags here that you might recognize. For example, bring back our girls. I suppose more recently, Black Lives Matter certainly has made a resurgence. It's certainly very topical again recently. Certainly one that your audience would have heard of. Time's Up, and finally then Me Too, and again another one that will be quite common and quite well known as well. So the fact that these are dotted throughout and they're used as examples, and they're used as relevant examples for your audience. Finally, then I thought climate change was a really nice one. Again, it's topical, but again, we're talking about the focus on the young people and having a way of exerting their influence on the changing world. Well, climate change is a perfect example of that. We've all seen that in the last couple of years, especially young people taking an active interest in issues around climate change and things like that. So just a nice piece here about climate change. And again, some really nice pieces of language and nice features that are quite effective using superlatives. So when you say the largest and the most concerning, it just adds that emphasis. It really gives that level of significance to what you're saying. You're not just saying that it's large and it's kind of concerning. You're saying it's the largest and the most concerning. So it's emotive as well, and it gets your audience thinking, and it kind of evokes a response in them. Another nice little example here I thought was quite effective. The student says, "We can no longer pretend that the rise in global temperatures is an exaggerated notion developed by paranoid scientists and hippies." It's kind of sarcastic. It's kind of dismissive of this particular standpoint. And it's a little bit humorous, it's a little bit glib, but it's quite effective and quite persuasive as well. So just a really nice little example there. As I mentioned, a few examples there of language and features that are seen sort of throughout the piece, but certainly in the conclusion, there's quite a lot of examples of really nice use of persuasive language in the conclusion. So we'll have a look here at this particular paragraph. You'll see firstly inclusive language yet again. Look at all of the use of we and us, and it's our responsibility and we need to do this. And again, that just brings people along, sweeps them up and helps them to really engage in what you're saying. That inclusive language is just so effective. Secondly, then the rule of three, a really lovely feature, and it's used really nicely in the conclusion. It's actually used throughout the essay in a couple of other places, but I just saw so many nice examples here. Rule of three is when you list things off in three. So maybe, for example, like adjectives, if you're trying to emphasize something, and just by putting them in three, it adds that extra bang, that extra kind of emphasis on what you're trying to say. So for example, we're not a generation of lazy, indifferent, or self-centered individuals, or intelligent, passionate, and enlightened. Compassion, empathy, and inclusiveness, or change, improve, and sustain. Just change and improve wouldn't really do it, but change, improve, and sustain just has a lovely ring to it. And that the rule of three just has that brilliant emphasis there. And finally, then repetition, which is kind of like the rule of three as well, but we do not turn a blind eye. We do not focus on the negative. And there's other examples of this throughout the essay as well. Really nicely used. And it just really hammers home the point. And coming back to our purpose, that's what you're trying to do. You're arguing in favor of emotion. So you've got to be persuasive. These kinds of features are exactly how you do that. So that brings us back to the sample. For the full PDF version, you can go to Studyclix Study, and also for the annotated version as well.